Time now to talk politics. We are joined by two of our favorite contributors to the program. We have Mr. John Burris and Miss Jessica DeLoach Sabin. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. So, you ready to scrap today?
Yeah.
Lots to talk about. All right. This week in Trump land, we have had special prosecutor indictments. We've had another attempt at different types of legislation. We have had a revolving door of staff over the last several weeks and months on the negative side. We have had on the positive side a SCOTUS appointment. We have had some new priorities on the domestic and international front. My question to you first off, Mr. Burris, is the Trump administration winning, or are we about to see it crater?
Neither. I mean, I think he's going to be president for 4 years, but they've yet to pass significant policy accomplishment outside of the Gorsuch nomination. So he's not winning, but I don't think he's going to crater either. Tax policy is a pivotal moment. And, you know, regardless of all that, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the fights he picks are generally fights that a majority of Americans agree with him on. You can say what you want to say about things like kneeling at football games and how silly it is that we're even having the discussion in some ways, but it's not silly to a lot of Americans that really view that in a very simplistic context, and in a lot of ways I agree with them. So
our poll showed that was pretty popular, his position on that. Almost two-thirds
It's
said
a
they agree
small
with the
issue
president.
compared to what they should be dealing with, but at the end of the day, Congress, the president, they need to pass something. Tax reform is the big moment. He's not cratering, but I mean, he needs to win on a policy level, and tax reform's the moment.
We're going to come back to tax reform in a minute. Same question to you, Jessica. Is this administration, is it about to fall off the cliff, or are they just moments away from pulling out the come from behind victory?
The easy and I would say incorrect answer would be to say that it's cratering. I don't think that cratering is the right term. I think that this administration is facing some significant difficulty, and that's mostly by its own doing. Mm-hmm. You know, President Trump made a lot of promises on the campaign trail that he's not been able to fulfill since he's been in office. And I think the biggest concern that his administration should have right now is that they've had no major accomplishments since he's been in office. And that's a problem for the American people, because one of the things that he ran on was the immediacy of how he'd be able to deliver certain results.
He says he's been winning on a lot of fronts, that he's the most successful president ever at this juncture in his presidency.
He's very incorrect there. And so I think that there's plenty of data that supports how incorrect he is. You know, if anything, you have a unified government right now. And so by definition, right, unified government, you have control of the White House and control of Congress, and you haven't been able to accomplish anything. The American people are paying attention to that. They're very sensitive to that. And I think that the Republican Party, especially if they fail when it comes to tax reform, they're going to pay a price for it in the primaries.
We're going to come back to, I'm still promising we're going to come to tax reform there. All right, there were some major indictments handed out this week from Special Prosecutor Bob Mueller. How do you think that's playing in Arkansas? Is it even registering with Arkansas?
Probably not, but that doesn't mean it's not a real issue. I mean, I think voters at the end of the day make their votes based on the things they care about. I don't think they care about indictments all that much, as silly as it may sound. I mean, I think usually they just watch the network they want to watch, and that reinforces the opinion they already have, and indictments are just fake news, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't think the indictments matter from an electoral standpoint. I think they probably matter from a legal standpoint. They obviously matter from a legal standpoint. I mean, the indictments are real. The question is, are we going to have a smoking gun moment, a deep throat moment with Nixon, or is it just going to be the apple dumpling gang of Trump, Trump's campaign team, who were just a bunch of college Republicans who never really grew up and thought they were Karl Rove? I think it's probably the latter. I think it's a bunch of Karl Rove wannabes who got sloppy. The Russians didn't really influence the election. They didn't stuff ballot boxes or do anything like that. I think they just saw a bunch of idiots working on a campaign and decided to take advantage of it, and the idiots let them take advantage of it. But I don't think it changed the outcome, but I think it was an indictable offense, and that's what Robert Mueller's doing.
All right, and there may be more. So, Jessica, what do you think? You're on the campaign trail, you're out there.
Sure.
Is this a topic of conversation?
I think it is. Now, let's talk about how it could be relevant to Arkansas. Let's say that you had a scenario come out where there are some ethical issues within the legislature here in the state, which we know there have been. And let's say that some decisions are made about who acted unethically and who didn't, and what those charges would be as a result of their behavior. Could the Democratic Party say, well, the Republican Party isn't ethical in their dealings? Yes, you could build a narrative around that. It's still a hard sell. I think that it's easy for Republicans all the way down to a local level to see some sort of effect by what happens nationally, but it's still a hard sell because regardless of what the governor's approval ratings are here in the state, people still really like him. And I don't think that they'd be as likely to hold him accountable for what the president of the United States does. Now, the GOP's brand overall, yeah, I think that it's in trouble because right now that party seems to be having a problem with denouncing, lots of really bad behaviors from people that the president said are pretty decent or good people. And we know that that's definitely not the case. So, yeah, I don't know. Things just aren't looking so good for the GOP.
Nationally, the Democratic Party has got a little bit of egg on
Yes,
its face at
it
this
sure
point in
does,
time,
and
too. The
rightfully
Donna
so.
Brazile revelation this week between Hillary Clinton's campaign and the Bernie Sanders campaign. Does this become a bigger story?
Well, I think that regardless of how big the story could become, it's a problem for the Democratic Party internally because there are different factions in the Democratic Party, and it is yet to be determined which of those factions will really kind of show you what the future of the party is in terms of who's leading it and what people want to see from the Democratic Party nationally. Until the Democratic Party can reconcile its internal differences and get right on what's best for the party and what its objectives are, it is going to continue to struggle. I mean, you'll hear people joke about how the Democratic Party's biggest enemy is itself. Well, this is an example of that. And so how do you overcome
You
it?
say Democrats are going to get all of their internal things in order right here? I've been watching Democrats for 25 or
No, I'm
30
saying
years.
they should.
They never are going
I'm
to get
saying they
everything in
should.
order.
Hey.
Just like Republicans are having trouble
We've
getting
got
everything
our
in
own
order right
problems
now.
too, but I wrote a column for talkbusiness.net probably 2 years ago where I said that Democrats were so fascinated with Trump that they were missing their own flaws. And Hillary's campaign was always a flaw. She was a flawed candidate, just like Bernie Sanders was, that they didn't have any better options than we were. I kind of agree with John Boehner. The fact that we got stuck with these two, or those two, because the election's over, is just kind of a reflection of both parties. Neither one represent the best. And so we're still paying the consequences of that, but President Trump is President Trump, and he's going to advance principles that I think are largely aligned with conservative principles, whether or his tweets being what they are, what he's actually doing on a policy level advances conservative principles.
All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to come back and talk tax reform, poll numbers, maybe even a few predictions from you two.
Right.
We're back with more with John Burris, Jessica DeLoach Sabin. I'm Roby Brock right after this. Welcome back to Talk Business and Politics. I'm Roby Brock, joined by Jessica DeLoach Sabin and John Burris. All right, we didn't get to tax reform in the last block. Let's get to it now. So the Republicans finally roll out a semblance of a tax reform package. We do see some details in it. I think it's going to shift quite a bit as it goes through the markup process on the House side, and then the Senate's going to have its own ideas of what should happen. So I guess the question is this a must-win for Republicans? Do they have to get this through to have some sort of chance of saying we had some legislative success this year? Jessica?
Yes, I absolutely think that they have to have this accomplishment under their belt if they would like to have a good start to the next year. You know, right now with this bill as it stands, it's going to need some significant Democratic support. And the reason why it's all procedural, right? Because if you increase the deficit over a certain amount of time, you're going to need more votes to approve a piece of legislation like that. And so right now, that's what's needed. But what we know is that the Republican Party has not included the Democrats in this conversation. They haven't even included some members of their own party, which sounds eerily similar to how they handled health care, and you saw how things went with health care.
Right.
So the Republicans would do well to say, okay, here's our pie in the sky vision, but now let's get realistic, because we also aren't able to tell you how we're going to pay for it. And that is a legitimate concern that anyone should have. So yes, they need this victory. I don't know if they're going to get it.
John, what do you think? Do they have to get it?
I think they need to pass it if they're going to retain the House
Is it
majority.
going to be a pass at all costs kind of thing? Do they just have to pass something? Or
I
do you
guess it
think they have
depends
to
on
pass
what.
something that's actually positive?
I don't think so this is just obviously my opinion, right?
That's why you're here.
I don't think that the policy is as important as passing something, because tax reform is not like healthcare. I mean, healthcare is 20% of the economy. It's very complex. It was already a system that everyone has a frustration with. So after you pass something like ACA, the doctor leaves a sponge, after your appendectomy, and you're going to blame ACA for it, and or your premiums went up, your prescription drugs cost too much. Whatever your beef was with healthcare, you blamed ACA. Taxes, as long as most Americans just pay less in taxes, all the political parties can put out the press releases that they want to put out. If most Americans, most Trump voters, just pay less in taxes at the end of whatever the debate's going to be, then I think Republicans win. And so they need to pass it. They need to make sure most Americans pay less in taxes. The rest are details. And I think that the plan that is proposed is a good start to that. I think there are some tweaks that could probably make it better, but they need to pass it. I think if they do, they retain the House majority.
Failure to pass this tax reform bill, does it give Democrats the opening that they need, not just nationally, but does it open up some things here in Arkansas, John?
Open up some things in Arkansas, meaning the congressional seats? No. I mean, I think all four of our congressmen are safe, and none of the senators are up for re-election this time. I think that people that are paid to obsess over this stuff obsess over it. And so at the end of the day, if they pass something, I think we'll win. And even if they don't pass something, the Democrats know that Republicans need to pass tax reform. So Democrats are going to be Democrats, and they're going to oppose whatever the Republicans propose. And so they know how important this is.
He's just telling it like it is right
Well,
there.
yeah, they're going to have to pass it with Republican votes because Democrats know how important it is. And that's where partisanship gets in the way of actual policy. And it's done that with Republicans before. I think they'll find a way to get the votes because they know how important it is.
Jessica, so if they don't pass tax reform, the Republicans don't pass tax reform, does it give Democrats an opening nationally and here in Arkansas?
Nationally, yes. Here in Arkansas, likely no. It just depends on how off the rails this conversation goes on top of other topics that we're having to entertain right now. One thing that's really interesting about this situation is that the Republican Party, I think that they have their big pie in the sky vision for what they want their tax reforms to be, and they're saying that this is good for the middle class. And you've seen a lot of people come forward and say, wait a second, why are you even going down this road of saying it's good for the middle class when we know it's a corporate tax cut, when it does not benefit the people who need help the most? That's a problem. And that's also an opportunity for the Democratic Party to build messaging around doing the best by the people who need the most help. And that's something where Democrats could do better, I think. And so this is an opportunity for Democrats to get that right.
It's the cut bill, or is it the something else bill? I don't know. All right, let's start the poll numbers, and let's talk about what we revealed at the top of the show, and we put them out earlier this week. We've got Donald Trump 47.5% to 45.5% approve, disapprove. Asa Hutchinson 45, 26.5 approve, disapprove. Tom Cotton 46 to 39 approve, disapprove, and John Bozeman 35% approve, 36 disapprove. What do these poll numbers tell you, Jessica?
I think they're very interesting because maybe what it indicates is that people just aren't happy with government. And I think this is a place where what happens nationally could maybe trickle down to a more local level, right? Where if your party's brand is suffering at the hands of the person who runs your party, then maybe that's a problem. And maybe the Republicans would do well to reflect on these numbers and say, where are we going wrong? Because, the governor of Arkansas, generally speaking, I think a lot of people here really like Governor Hutchinson. But what justifies these approval numbers? Is it just because of a Republican brand? Because yes, it should be, considering all things that are happening around the messaging with the Republican Party nationally, but that's not the fault of the governor. But it's usually very easy to blame people for big problems as long as they're like the head of a party,
Whoever's
right?
in charge, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And his spread is good. It's comfortable. It's almost 20 points.
Yeah.
But all of these elected officials, all Republicans, below 50% with their job approval ratings. John, same question to you.
I think there's interesting dynamics that show you the difference among each elected official. Tom Cotton is always going to have a high fave and a very high unfave.
Right.
He's very outspoken. People know where he stands, and that's why people vote
His
for
numbers
him.
are pretty much in line with what we've always seen with
They're
Tom
exactly
Cotton,
what
quite
they were
frankly,
with Mark Pryor in 2014, and he'll win. I think at the end of the day, people are always prone to say they're unhappy with what they have, and then when it comes time to compare it with what they could have, they choose what they. Yeah. It's always easy to say, like, I don't like the guy I have, and then when you compare it to what you could have, then you just go with the guy
because
you have.
elections are binary choices,
Right.
and right now this is just a job approval. What do you
That's
think of the
right.
one person that's there right now?
Nobody
So-
likes to say that they like their politician. I mean, and so, and then it just turns into an argument over the sharpest spoon. And typically, I think the guys we have will win.
Well, and to defend our poll numbers too, we're just trying to see what's percolating in the voter attitudes out there too. So, all right, we got about a minute left here. Let's get some predictions from the two of you. Who wants to volunteer to go first with their prediction? Jessica.
you-
Oh, sure. I'll jump right in.
All right, tell me something I don't know. Give me a prediction.
Something you don't know?
Well, a prediction.
Oh,
I may
great.
know your prediction.
A prediction that I have. Let's talk about tax reform. I think that you're going to see the Republicans not get much done on tax reform before the end of the year. I think that this conversation is going to get a lot messier before there's any sort of resolution, if there's any to come at all.
All right, there's her prediction, John Burris. It can't be about your lawn or your trees or anything.
My
either,
trees
so-
are finally turning red, and I'm
Okay, well,
very
that's not
excited
true.
about
That's not a
it.
prediction.
So it's going to be a good week on the tree front. But beyond that, I think that the tax reform debate happening at a national level will trickle down to Arkansas. There's a lot of focus here on what our state tax code looks like. The governor has said he wants to get to a 5% top rate, which is a very conservative position. I think that's going to help him if he has a primary challenge. And I think the legislature leadership has exhibited the same kind of mindset. So the debate around what our tax code looks like here will be the big debate over the next year, and hopefully there's consensus on how we get to a top rate of 5%.
See, you've been watching Talk Business and Politics. Jim Hendren on last week saying
Absolutely.
something to the same effect there. All right, John Burris and Jessica DeLoach Sabin, thank you both very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you. And thank you so much for tuning in. That's all for today's program. I'm Roby Brock. We'll see you next time.